Now, ahead of the FPL game being officially launched, I thought this would be a cool video to make. I'm going to give you 5 tips to help you have a great season. Right, you can see the title of this slide here. But before we get into the video, I just want to say, if you're looking forward to the FPL season and want to get your fix of FPL content going into it, then please consider subscribing down below to the Golden Goal YouTube channel. Secondly, I had a decent season last year. I think pretty sure I've got my rank in the thumbnail. Hopefully you can understand I can use that for marketing, but at the same time, I don't claim to be like an FPL god or expert, all right? I've played fantasy football for nearly a decade now, and over that time, I think I've learned some basic things which have helped me towards having a decent season last year and in years gone by as well. So these are, 5 tips based on that kind of decade of experience, basically, okay? First up, right, I would say it might not be the most exciting thing to do, but I would try and start as safely as possible, right? So first draft that you make for game week 1, you can wildcard later on, but the first draft you make, you want to pick players that are guaranteed to start and play 90 minutes. To be honest, this is a pretty standard throughout the FPL season, right? You want to pick players who are going to start. I really look to get set piece takers in, particularly penalty takers, right? Because even if they have a dip in form or have a bad game or their team doesn't play well, they always have a chance of getting a return, right? Just by the fact that they take penalties. Now, there's a general piece of advice I give most people, and it's not my own. It comes from a winner of a previous game that I used to play, a chap named Paul McNulty. Legend, by the way, Paul. His quote, well, I'm quoting from a podcast he used to do, which is, you can't win a fantasy game at the start of a season, but you can certainly lose it by picking too many differentials and just putting yourself out of the running straight away. So you're never going to win FPL in the first sort of 5 game weeks, but you can put yourself in a position where you can't win, if that makes sense. Now, what it does mean is picking these safe players, they're going to be highly owned, right? There's no doubt about it. The likes of, I picked Eze as the player on this slide, right? He's my prime example of someone that's probably going to start every game that he's fit for, likely play 90 minutes. He takes penalties and set pieces, provided he doesn't sign for Arsenal, which I think is the latest rumour. But he's one of those players that just ticks the box of a good, safe asset to start the season with. And you have to remember, this game is a marathon, not a sprint. You can lead the marathon in the first 200 metres. Most people, right, can absolutely sprint off the start in a marathon and lead it for the first 50 metres and then be absolutely cooked and lose the race, right? That's what FPL is. It's 38 game weeks long. That's the mindset you need to be in. So it might not be the most exciting thing to do, but I'd look to start things safely. Next up, we've got captaincy. Now, I think captaincy, well, it's obviously very valuable in FPL, right? A good proportion of your points throughout a season will come from your captain. And in some game weeks, right, certainly last season, Salah being prime example, he scored more points as my captain than the rest of my entire team did, right? Now, that's why I'm just saying, captain's really important, right? And he might have like the permanent captain tagline going into next season. He had the highest FPL scoring season of all time last year, right? But even for Salah, there was a time last year where he went through a bit of a dry patch and there were other players who were genuine captaincy alternatives some weeks. And if you went correct on those weeks, you could have had some gains. And my general point here, right, is you need to have in your team, essentially, the player each week who you think is the best captain, okay? And, yeah, it just is so valuable, the captaincy, right? What more can I say? I'm going to show you the fixtures now, and we'll talk about weeks, maybe in the first half of the season, where Salah might not be the best captain. Right, this fixture grid comes from FPL Team. Absolutely legendary tool. I've just made a draft video, by the way, using their tool. You can check that out on the channel, and I'll leave a link to FPL Team below. But what we've got here is the first 13 game weeks of the season, right? And I genuinely do think there are a couple of weeks here where you could consider Salah as maybe not the best captain. I'm looking at, well, I think in game week 2, he's got Newcastle away. In game week 3, he's got Arsenal at home. In game week 11, he's got Man City away as well. And you look at some of these weeks, right? So the week that he plays Newcastle, Arsenal have leads. So, for example, if Gyökeres signs for Arsenal or Saka, they could potentially be captaincy alternatives to Salah that week. The Arsenal game, I'm just looking if any other teams have good fixtures. Possibly, Newcastle got Leeds, so that could potentially lead to Isak potentially being a better captain that week. Then we look, for the rest of the weeks, I'd probably look to captain Salah. And then game week 11, well, you've got Man City for Liverpool, and Arsenal got Sunderland again. So there's a genuine captaincy alternative there. Nottingham Forest got Leeds. You'd probably go for an Arsenal player there, particularly if Gyökeres is on form and playing to the similar level that he did for Sporting Lisbon. I mean, that's a genuine captaincy alternative. So I go back to just thinking how valuable that captaincy play is. You want to make sure you have the best player to be that captain in your team every week and give them the armband. Now, this sort of tags along, I guess, with the start safely point, but it's around differentials, right? And I picked Morgan Rogers here as a prime example. There were some people that tipped him before the season even started to be a fantastic asset, and fair play to them if they did. But on the most part, I think it's really hard to spot a good differential in FPL before a ball has been kicked in the Premier League, right? And for me, when it comes to picking differentials, the secret is not being the absolute first adopter to the differential because, well, it backfires more often than it doesn't, right? But you want to be an early adopter. You want to give it 2, maximum 3 game weeks of observing this player, knowing that they're putting up the numbers, knowing that they're going to start consistently, that they're proven to be a real threat, and then get on them quickly. Not be first, but get on them quickly. That would be my mind, because you're playing a bit of a gambling game when you're the first adopter. And like I said, it backfires, I think, more often than it doesn't. And for me, when the season started, I just remained flexible for those first 2 game weeks. For me, I try and build a team where I just don't need to make a transfer at all for a good few game weeks, unless, of course, I get an injury. Remain flexible, observe, and if you spot someone after a couple of weeks, that looks good, then you should consider buying them. But I'd really try to avoid any sort of punty differentials right at the start of the game. For me, that's not the time to do it. The time to do it is when, you're getting towards the end of the season, your rank is not necessarily sorted, but you know what kind of finish you're on for, and then maybe picking the differentials to help you excel in your finish. Or again, not being the first adopter, but being an early adopter. Now, there's pros and cons to patience in FPL, right? But I still believe, on balance, patience in FPL is largely rewarded, right? And what do I mean by patience? Specifically, I mean by sticking with tried and trusted FPL assets. So you could go through a period of time, right, where you've got someone like Mbumo in your team, or even Salah, for example. They go 2 or 3 game weeks without scoring, their form dips a little bit, and you think, oh, wow, my mate in my mini league's got this guy in his team. He's doing really well. I'm stuck on Mbumo. I'm stuck on Salah. He's not performing. He's going to overtake me. And then the week that you sell this tried and trusted proven asset, they score a hat trick, right? That's a story that I've certainly had in the past before. And that's something that can really bite you in FPL. And what I would say is back yourself, right? Back yourself in your picks and your original plan, right? Stay patient and stick to that plan. I don't know if any of you are into investing or whatever, but when you pick stocks in the stock market, right, you do so because you believe in that company or that stock long term, right? They might not in the specific game week that you pick them absolutely score loads of points and go mad, but in the long term, which is how you should really think about making your transfers and your decisions with investments as well. In the long term, you trust that player and you know they will put up the numbers, consistently score points over a long period of time. And that's the kind of mindset that you need to be in with FPL, right? You need to pick players with a long-term vision and not get too distracted if they go 2-3 game weeks without scoring. However, there are circumstances where you want to lose that patience, right? And I think I'm looking at Haaland last season as a prime example, right? My patience last season, it's a lesson I've learned, was probably a little bit too much in Haaland. And I'd say it wasn't just Haaland performing badly, it was his team, Man City in general, just being rubbish as well. They obviously had a really poor season last year, right, to at least their standards. But I think that was a little bit different of a scenario than just someone like Mbumo going 2 game weeks without scoring. Brentford looking pretty dangerous, but he just so happens not to score in those 2 game weeks. Well, that's a little different scenario if Mbumo's still at Brentford by the time the season starts. But I think you get your point. Largely, patience is rewarded in FPL, but you need to use that, cautiously, right? It doesn't happen all the time, with Haaland, of course, last season being a prime example of that. And my final point is around just not chasing rank. It's similar, it carries on from the point I made about specific players, but after a bad game week, right, there can be some real high temptation to make transfers immediately to your team, take hits to try and get that rank back, right? And it's a similar concept to the patience that I made earlier. You've picked the players in your team for a reason, right? You believe in those players to deliver for you, and you've got a well, I'd like to think you should have a long-term plan in terms of transfers and why you've brought those players in the first place, right? That decision that you originally made is more informed than a decision to chase rank, urgently make transfers to your team and chop and change stuff, right? Back yourself. You pick those players for a reason, and you need to back yourself. And I think it's sort of a mantra for life, really, but stick to your long-term plan over short-term temptations, right? Because you could so be that your whole team is blanked one week. You know, 2 or 3 players have performed really well that aren't really the best FPL picks. They're just in a little bit of a purple patch. You take a hit to bring a couple of them in. You sell some good players, and then the good players do really well. The players in a purple patch drop off. Your hits of transfers down. You're back down in points. Your team's a mess. You know, all of this can sort of snowball from making those short-term decisions. So yeah, don't chase rank, stay patient, make long-term decisions, and that should lead to success in FPL. All right, well, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. I tried not to get into like too philosophical with this stuff because it is just a game at the end of the day with FPL, but I think these 5 sort of core fundamentals in terms of a way of playing the game have really served me to get the rank that I did last season, and yeah, should hopefully do the same for you as well. Honourable mention would just be, in general, knowing what the fixtures are and having a plan, right? I'm making a genuine assumption that most people know that's probably a good thing to do in FPL, right? But I would say if I were to give a 6th piece of advice, it's a bit less, I say, a bit more obvious than those ones that I've given, it would be just to know the fixtures and have a plan for at least the first 5 game weeks in terms of transfers that you want to make. And to be honest, I'd want to build a team I didn't really want to make a transfer for at least 3 weeks. You know, you've basically got a wild card at the start of the season, complete free reign to do whatever you want with your team. You want to go at least 2 or 3 weeks, I'd say, without having to make a transfer. But anyway, that's a little bonus tip for you. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a like rating. Subscribe, like I said, to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there down below. Or actually, no, it should be here on your screen on the closeout. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I don't know what happened there. And I'll catch you in my next video.